Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Kimberly Cloud Show. I'm your host, Kimberly Cloud. I have a very special guest here for the show. I would have had him on my Podbean, but I'm going to record it today, practically re-record it and make it into an MP3 that can be shown on iHeart and many more other podcasts, major podcast network. But let's introduce him. For one, what is your name? Where are you from? And we'll go from there after that. What is your name and where are you from?
Hey, Kimberly. I'm Leopoldino Jeronimo. I'm Mozambican. Mozambique, it's a country in Southern Africa. And I work in sustainable international development and conflict resolution, mainly doing analysis and research.
And you live in Minneapolis, right?
Yes, indeed. Minneapolis. In Blaine, to be exact.
And your original roots stem from Africa, right?
Yeah, my home country is Africa, Mozambique. Those are my roots.
Can you tell me a little bit about your past living in Africa and then traveling? You're a time traveler to the United States. So you went from the future to the past. So tell me about your past, present, and future.
Oh, well, okay. Let's try it out. I was born in an environment where it was a post-conflict era. Mozambique was colonized by the Portuguese, and the independence was in 1975. And right after the independence in the 70s, all the way until 1992, Mozambique entered into a civil war. So I was born in the midst of that civil war. And then my parents had to flee to the capital of the north, Nampula, still within Mozambique. And that's where I
So there
grew
was
up.
a war. Let me clarify this. There was a war before you were born. You were born right into it. And your
Yes.
parents, in order to raise you, they fled that war in Africa and moved to another part of Africa.
They moved, is the same part of Africa, but they moved from the district where, because in the countryside, it was heavy, while in the urban centers, it was still dangerous, but not as riskier as in the districts where I was born.
Can
So
you tell me a little bit about the war that was going on? What were they doing?
Well, there's so many stories that go around, but my version of it, again, I highlight my version, right? It's a conflict between the ruling party, the government of the day in after 1975, when Mozambique became independent. The ruling party took power, and the system of governance was not favored by another group of Mozambicans who have allied with foreign entities and created a rebel party. So they started fighting for about almost 2 decades, and the data of how many people died is also still under review, but about 1 million people have died, and millions have been displaced to the neighboring countries where they have been facing all sorts of consequences as refugees. But the question of the conflict was because some were advocating for a democratic country, an open economy, the open economy country where anyone can come and go, invest and make money. The reasons were there, right? Well, not
So
to
can
say,
I ask you something? Do
yeah,
we
sure.
still do we? Because I'm 88.8% African, even though I'm like African American. I'm mixed with a lot of things, including white. But the two parties that were fighting for 2 decades in Africa, one wanted a democracy, while one did not want a democracy, which means that for 20 years, who's been in office? I can say when I was 18, the Democrats, because I'm 38 now, or let's go back to the 70s. So the 70s, who was in office, and we go for the root of the cause. Whatever the Democrats or whoever was connected to whoever, whatever government that was a foreign government, just like history repeats itself. I have to say this because this is why Africa is still suffering, because the rich get richer and the poor die off. The poor don't get money and they're living poor there. And you can finish your story. Go ahead and start where you said that they got into a war and your parents moved.
Yeah. Well, there is a lot to the story, as in the reasons behind it, because Mozambique, it's not an island, but it's like an island. It's the only country right there speaking Portuguese, surrounded by English-speaking countries, which means English colonized countries, and one that has been very determined to go against the ruling party governance policy was South Africa, because at that time, it was during the apartheid regime. So it was heavy load, and the type of governance was not a match, because as Mozambique, it was one, a source of natural resources, minerals, wildlife, forestry. Two, was also a corridor to the ocean, to the ports. So South Africa used Mozambique for many economic interests. And the main power plant created in Mozambique, the hydro electric power, was supplying the South Africa industry all of its 85% of energy, right? So
who is supplying the energy?
Mozambique, during the colonial era, there was a very strong partnership between the Portuguese in Mozambique and South Africa. So there was no interest into seeing Mozambique becoming independent and then having a different leadership, which would change all of the economic agreements, economic deals going on. But again, it's my version of understanding that history, right? Anyone can come and say differently. That's the beauty of reading, learning, listening, right? We build up. But now, when I was born, it was in the second phase after the Portuguese and after the independence war was passed, in the second phase during the Civil War, where there was Mozambicans against Mozambicans, right? So us against us, two sides.
Who started it?
It's tricky to answer that question because it implies that I pick a side, and I was
That's
not
true. I can respect that.
And I cannot pick a side for the simple fact that all I'm saying is based on what somebody has written. And anyone who writes something has a percentage of bias in it, as much as we like to say we're impartial, which is good, right? But let me tell you, the idea of my parents taking me and my sisters fleeing from Malema to Nampula in the city, it was to avoid the worst, that we lose. And they did a really good job. I mean, look at me. Here I am, almost in my 40s here. So they achieved the objectives. But were they successful in their economic endeavors? I don't know, because again, they're individuals with very personal objectives. But when I look at them, I'm inspired by the sacrifices they made, right? Now, at the moment, there are lots of eyes to Mozambique because of the natural resources. And unfortunately, there is another conflict going on, which emerged from an insurgency related to, as many others say, unattended grievances, or neglected
Something
social.
is seriously, I don't mean to cut you off, but something is seriously going on because last year, this young lady, she had to be all of 16 or 17. She wrote out to me. She was from Nigeria. And I have this wonderful guy that's between the ages of 19 and 22. He's from Nigeria. I have a couple of pen pals from Nigeria. And so I invited her on my international ambassadors program. Now, she was determined and she made it, but she didn't have no electricity. Now, if what you say is true, which is y'all natural resources is electric, then why are certain cities, such as she's just living in a shack, suffering in Africa? Like, who is the president of Africa? Like, whoever's the president should mediate between or navigate between the governors and help reconstruct Africa instead of, to me, I feel that their influences are more on political monetary gain than helping the Black people. I think whoever's up at the top is being paid to neglect y'all and me. And I'm just being honest. I believe before slavery, whoever came to get us were bribed or had an agreement, mutual agreement between an African American to agree to ship us to the United States. If we can cause war amongst ourselves in a third world country, it must have been some monetary agreement, because I'm like, why do we fight amongst each other like here in the United States, but the elite come to some sort of agreement of how to ship us over and turn us into slaves temporarily? Like, can you add on that?
Yeah, it's quite a lot. I mean, I'll be shifting away from my personal history, but it's all related, right? If we look at the United States, it's a kind of, it might bring an illusion to analyze the continent Africa with that mirror, because United States first has built the structure that has brought all these different countries into one, right? So all these 50 states, they have their independent jurisdiction, but they have managed to build a structure of governance. Therefore, they have agreed that whatever happens, we are one, right? So that is not the case for Africa. Why? First, you have different colonizers who have conquered different parts of the continent, and they have left legacies that do not allow a merge of interest locally.
Whoa.
That's why you have regions that come together because of their colonial allegiance. Countries that speak French in Africa, they come together because they were colonized by French. And then countries that speak Portuguese, they come together because they were colonized by Portugal. And so it goes. The problem with that for Africans is that there is this colonial legacy to which we are even empowering and advocating not to eliminate. Why? Because we love power. And the reason why we were fighting the colonialists, it's because of the oppression. That's what we said back then, right? By we, I'm trying to include myself into those who fought for our freedom, right? I'm being humanistic. But then when the colonialists left in each one of our countries in Africa, we did not do nothing else other than just replacing who is sitting in that chair on the other side. Simply from the white to the black oppressor, or from to the foreigner to the national oppressor. And there is one country that has a very peculiar story, which is Liberia, that it has to be discussed in a different context. But those who started the leadership were actually settlers, the freed slaves from the United States who came and created the governance structure, and then they built on. That's another. The conflicts were of a different kind, but the same nature. The same group of people oppressing the others, replacing the colonialists, right? So that's what happens. But now you talked about very specific things like electricity. Let me tell you, Mozambique, in the beginning I said it was producing electricity in one of the 5th major electrical power plants, Hidroelétrica de Cahora Bassa, that's the name in Portuguese. And 85% of the electricity that power plant produced was shipped to South Africa, another country.
Whoa, get out of here.
And the bizarre part of it is that the electricity it doesn't go remotely, right? It's not like an SMS that you send, you don't see where it passes. You see the cables up in your house that, oh, this is electricity that is passing by. It's going to another country. But here, there is no electricity. It's coming from District A all the way crossing the border to South Africa where the electricity.
That is selfish.
It is selfish, but there are lots of things behind that might fool ourselves into debating. And then we say, no, the Mozambicans were oppressing each other. That's true, but it's not the whole truth, because the system that was established when the government took power, first, they inherited an almost 500 million something. I hope the numbers are right.
Where did they inherit it from? That's
A
number
debt.
one.
That was a debt. A debt. Money that they did not take themselves, a loan that they did not ask themselves to build the hydroelectrical power. So the Portuguese had that debt.
Now, is the Portuguese a blended, diverse mix plus the other race? Are they blended, like white, black,
Well,
how
nowadays,
does that look?
Nowadays, it's blended, but when we speak of history, it's usually the white, because the Black Portuguese came really after the whole thing, and they have not really been a leadership part of establishing the structures. Most of the
who is South Africa's president, or is it North Africa versus South Africa, or is it just, how does it work? What is the sections or districts?
Well, we do have different countries. In one country, South Africa itself, that is also named South Africa, is one country that then is also the neighbor of Mozambique. North Africa, it involves different countries, many countries, including Egypt, right? But then as we go, the extensions, the way they did was to divide in West Africa, Central Africa. So you have the Sahel, the region where you have Burkina Faso, Mali, and all these countries, they have different wealth equivalents. Most of them, they go together into natural resources that every foreign entity is looking towards. But now we have tackled into different things, not specifically closing the argument. And this is actually because when we discuss the history of Africa, there are so many sides that we can tackle and we might lose ourselves. Now, let me bring back the point to how Mozambique emerged. Even though there was this civil war of 2 decades, we managed to reach an independence. And the independence was labeled as a success case because it took almost 20 years in quiet peace. So we even forgot. So war was already just part of history. And some of the youngsters didn't even know what a war is. Whatever weapons they saw, it was from the police or just in the movies. They never probably saw an army in action. But it took 20 years until late in 2017, 2019, 2012, actually, in small fragments of the same belligerents, the same parties, like the opposition and the ruling party, they started fighting again in centralized. But those were just small incidents in certain parts, all of which indicates that the agreements that were made in the past were not, one, honored, two, followed up. Followed up meaning, hey, whatever it is we agreed for the ceasefire, are we complying? And who was involved? The countries that were mediating that conflict. And actually, through the United States, I was able to access very interesting documentation that detail that peace process that I did not become aware when I was in Mozambique. Meaning access to information is also an issue there. That's why you have parts fighting, just saying, yeah, I'll kill you, I'll kill you, I'll kill you. But a few of these parties actually know the context of that conflict. Not everyone. So when I came here, I had access of these documents, and through my school, that was also an interesting learning moment. That wow.
Let's talk about school, because you are well educated and you're teaching me a lot. But let's talk about your education in the United States versus your education, everything that you learned in Africa. Like, how is the different structures of education? Is it the true factor where they tell you what's going on truthfully in your history, or do they suppress?
I would be forced to say suppress.
I knew it.
I'll be forced.
But in Africa or United States?
Oh no, back home. But it's not intentional suppressing today. It's just the way the education system is already built. You see, the structure of education there does not allow a young individual to grow a critical thinker. That's when
so he has or she has no imagination. They can't do critical thinking.
Oh no, we do a lot of critical thinking. The problem is expressing that critical thinking. We are creative because of the challenges that we face individually. Like from leaving home to get to school, it's just a burden. What time do you wake up? What do you eat if there is something to eat? How you get water to shower if you shower? It's a lot of challenges that we creatively overcome in small portions until we get to the school. And then we get there. What language do I speak at home? Because I'm not Portuguese. And yet the education system at school obliges me to start my learning course in Portuguese, even though I do not speak Portuguese. I was born in a Makua speaking community. Makua is my native language.
How do you say thank you in Makua?
Koshukuru.
Koshukuru.
Koshukuru, yes.
Koshukuru.
So that child, it's only 5 years old, who appeared to be a very clever child at home, because she knows when it's sunrise, when it's sunset, when it's about to rain. She knows how to throw seeds. She knows how to follow the parents to do some harvesting, or she knows how to what are the structures to build the house. So she knows many things. And even the parents send that child to the market to buy a few things, and she comes with change. You see, it's 5, 7, very young age. But when she gets to school for the first time, day 0, then she hears "Bom dia a todos."
Bom dia a todos.
Bom dia a todos. Like that's an example. Bom dia. So I just told you bom dia to you. Did you understand? Unless you speak Portuguese, you would not understand. So that's the 5-year-old child. She's there, day 0 at school. And she's like, okay, what's that?
Oh my God. So what you're saying is at 5 in kindergarten, when you've been taught for 5 whole years by your traditional parents a certain language, you step into elementary school and they just start breaking down and speaking Portuguese?
You are slapped with Portuguese. So that it's, look, the linguistic experts will have different arguments saying, oh no, you need to expose the child to learn. That's okay, it's true. But hey, look at me. If I today, right now, I take my flight, go to China, I will hopefully expect that I will find somebody who will be able to translate to me in English, at least the first days, until I know what is chun, whatever it is I'm saying that I don't know. So imagine a child of 5 years. You are crushing the motivation to learn. You are crushing the motivation to creatively think. This child that at home was creative. That's why the parents felt encouraged enough to say, hey, let's put her in school. Maybe she will be clever. And then she gets there, she finds out that, oh no, whatever it is she thinks she knows, she's dumb. But she's not dumb. She's made to be dumb by the system right there. See, so it's not intentional that somebody is saying we have to oppress. No, the system was built that way. And the problem there is, when do we say enough is enough so that we can then restructure the education system? Just that small thing. You see, how do we welcome the child the first day in school, a child that never spoke? I lost you for a minute.
I apologize. I just want to explain this real quick. I plan on getting another computer. My computer went dead like my other clients, but that'll be edited. But so you were saying, because the message needs to get out there, that you walked into a school at age 5 and they just started speaking Portuguese. Go ahead and explain that again.
Yeah. So this, it's just one part of an issue that burdens me. That's why I was, with great pleasure, engaged into some bilingual education programs, which were, in a sense, very successful. And what those programs did was to start a pilot education approach that welcomes the child with the native language she or he speaks from home, and then gradually start bringing word by word, item by item, picture by picture in a different language. So there is a shift, a gradual shift, and also a love. But I grew up fearing to speak my own language because...
How many languages do you speak?
5. My local languages, there is Emakwa, that's my native language, and then there is Elomwe, my another native language. There is Emarovoni, my third native language, and then comes Portuguese, the official language, and English, the international language. So these are the 5 languages I comfortably speak. My native are 3: Emakwa, Elomwe, and Emarovone.
And that's a form. It's a form of African. 4 of them are African, ain't they? Aren't
they? 3 of them are African, except
one is Portuguese and one is English.
English, yeah, those
that
are.
Is so cool, yo. You know 3 languages of like. Darn, I wish I did. You know, like that. If you wanted to, technically, you could work for like an international foreign country for something huge. You know, like seriously. So I don't want to. You've spoken enough. The people know that Africa is struggling and that they got some good and bad things, but for the ultimate, I have to ask one more question before we dig into your podcast, which is, if South Africa is getting all the electric from North Africa, that means that whoever's in South Africa that's ruling the majority, or this one person, is draining North Africa of all its resources while keeping it poor, and it's just not right to me. What is your insight on that?
You're asking how the countries align to share or converge their interests. Is that how?
Well, I
or
just
the benefits?
because you said that in your city, where you were raised, that you used to see lines, like electrical lines, going all the way to South Africa, right? These electrical power lines, at a certain age you started noticing that they're running into South Africa.
No, I got you. The thing is, it wasn't even where I was born. Where I was born, that was still history. I was like unimaginable. It's in Tete, another province within Mozambique, where the hydroelectrical power plant was built, that those people there locally, they couldn't have electricity. And only in 2007, I was actually part of the small young students who were hired by an international company, which was hired by the government and maybe another donor, to do a research inquiring how much of money or what creative ideas, how productive can the people use electricity if they had it? Because they were trying to expand. That's it. But it was in 2007 we did that research. I wasn't involved into drafting the policy or the completion of that research. I was just the guy, one of the young students hired in a district to go in the field, talk to the people with a questionnaire, right? To understand how beneficial would it be if you had electricity? That was, I think, the key. And only in 2010, the government was able to find alliances to expand electricity, the same electricity that was going to South Africa all along. So now it was possible to bring here, but not everywhere, just the capitals in the districts. For instance, if it was Minnesota, for instance, just to bring electricity to Minneapolis. Right, that was, just an example. But then gradually, it became expanding. So now we have almost everywhere electricity. Now, is it good, not good? That's technically a totally different question. But electricity is almost everywhere today. That's why people are even able to make small money on their own way, selling ice cream. Anyway, it's just creativity. It's not a question. But you asked, how does it work that one country takes benefit over the other country's resources? That's a question that I don't think I do have the answer, because there is a lot that is involved. My own country at the moment is going through an insurgency.
What's insurgency?
Mozambique.
What does that mean?
Insurgency, there is a terrorist, is now called the terrorist group, that has started killing people in
you're in this is Central Africa that you're talking about?
In Southern Africa.
South Africa. People are killing a specific government organization.
No, they're not government organizations. It's different and a mix of national and foreign groups who came to that province looking for natural resources that were very abundant. That's actually what the media and the religious say. But the problem is that when they started killing people in the beginning, in 2017, it appeared to look like a religious conflict. So the authorities said, no, we cannot interfere into religious conflicts because the country is not religious identified. We are like for all religions. But unfortunately, it grew up. And now the insurgents, these groups that are killing people, they started with small machetes. They evolved until now that they're using drones and heavy weapons. But luckily, the government was able now, right, to have international support, including Rwandan troops, the Southern Africa Development Community that has at some point sent another force, the European Union, the United States, have sent support to either train the government, the military government, to respond to that insurgency. But the problem go beyond that, because the displaced people, those people who have fled those communities, are now living in a compound or in different places, struggling. I'm talking about people who grew up only fishing. Their only business was fishing, or their only business was growing crops. Now they have to flee and go to a community where they just have to stand. So you can imagine everything else comes around, like hunger, starvation, frustration. We can go psychological, like the traumas that they experience. It's a lot. But then the international.
Are there rules within Africa? Because this is so confusing to me. Egypt is in Africa. We got Egypt, we got the Nile River, we got so many characters that then crossed over to the United States that played an important role in the Bible. But yet they're killing your people, my people, our people, whether white, black, or Hispanic, due to some new organization, whether that is sick. That is very, very sick. And I truly believe that this is smoke and mirrors, because it's like all it takes is for all them government officials in each country, in each city, in each district to actually have a meeting of the minds about a new constitution type structuralized bill or legacy they want to pass for the next 100 to 200 years to get their African American people and help regrow Africa, the whole Africa. Yeah, there's going to be killing. Yeah, there's going to be violence, but they're not doing nothing. They're fighting amongst each other.
Yeah, unfortunately, it's. I was trying to make a point that it's really complicated, because it's not one individual that it's like calling the shots to do harm. It's the individuals that they cannot hold themselves accountable to lead change. What am I trying to say? From the learnings that I've been, like the readings and the talkings with other researchers, professors, people who have fled wars, and I have friends who are refugees, some of them are in the US, and when we talk, they say, look, Leo, I'm here, but I wish I would be home, because I miss what I knew what to do, because they were able to do a lot of things, but their houses are burned, their families are dead. And so it's not one president that will bring up change to the whole continent, because the whole continent, it's more than 100 countries. It's a lot.
That's 100 countries in Africa.
More than 100 countries, yeah.
Hey, we got 100 countries. That's cool.
All 100 countries. It's not only Egypt to discuss with Ethiopia, hey, how do we engage with the River Nile, or to Sudan coming there, or South Sudan. It has to be first, as an individual, how much of myself I trust in the system, and how much of the system I'm able to change. But again, changing the system, this does not mean revolution. I'm not saying, hey, let's now do a revolution and all, because at this point, whatever anger we try to express in the angry way format, we will just be feeding the same structure that does not solve the issue. If I'm part of international organization and I'm trying to bring a development program that is focused at helping people into growing crops so that they can grow more crops every year and they lose less, I think I can contribute to that program into at least helping the government, helping the people in the ground, helping the activists to teach and to learn simultaneously. How can we make sure that what we are doing today does not harm tomorrow? Like, if I come now as an agent of change, am I repeating a message that worked in Europe that will not work in Mozambique? Or I'm trying to learn the Mozambican way and say, hey, have you explored what we did in Spain, in Portugal, I would actually start with Norway, countries that have at least indexes of corruption very low, almost zero. Norway and then Finland come. So have we tried to learn those? What happens is the imposition. I know something, and I think what I know is the best option to Mozambique. That's not true. Because what I will find in Mozambique is resistance to, hey, come on, you are in the United States having your good life, and then you are coming here to tell us what to do. So
No,
it's not going to work. Yeah,
that is definitely not true, because you're learning about the world, but how you came over here was pretty sad, because of you. I believe that, I think you said in the beginning you kind of like had to come over here. Is that true?
Yeah, pursuing education. Remember the child that I was mentioning to you. Pursuing a good education is probably the best path to expanding the knowledge. What I know, I would probably have not been able to know if I kept myself in a closed circle that does not allow me to critically think, to ask questions. Because in certain parts of education, when I ask a question to a teacher, I'm actually being a bad student because I am expected to say, yes, sir. While when I was in school here, my teachers asked me a question. Why are you not asking a question?
Whoa, you're saying back in the day, they said it was wrong to ask a question?
Yes.
Oh my God. Where was this at again? Was it Africa or United States?
I was in Mozambique. Yes, the Africa is a continent, but I was in Mozambique. The education system was allowing me to be obedient. It's obedience. It's not wrong for the intention. The problem is that it was not part of a policy that was envisioning to teach me how to be an independent human being. And then when I finish school, I can come back to my community with solutions of the problems I have been facing.
The only way to change the solution to Africa is, because I don't blame Africa, the whole Africa. Like I said, I blame certain selective elite officials. It has to be their fault. They're not perfect. You can't say because you're in elite status you're perfect. You just know a lot of people and you've been paid to make people feel comfortable. But what I'm trying to say is my solution, and I'm just throwing out there for the future because this is the show, but to get certain countries like the US, really the US and Europe and parts of the world that is connected to Africa to join in and start creating rules like be a guardian ad litem. That's what they are now. But help if Africa wants to flourish. Obviously, nobody is this is where it started in Egypt. This is where it started with Ra. You know, they said it was mythology, and it's not mythology. They just found Osiris's body a month ago. They said it was mythology, and now it's all connecting, because I'm like, the only way is for them to create a proposition for Africa to condense their elite powership to grow technologically or artificially for the whole as a whole. But they seem to get people in these low structure but high structure, because think about this. These people, whatever their names are, that are organizations, bad organizations that's killing people. You said they started off with machetes and now they have drones. Who is funding this? Who is funding? They're quick to fund this crap, but they don't want to fund education or more advanced technology on Africa. And I have to take a stand. Those are my people too. So somebody need to come up with a proposition for Africa to condense their power, have people in certain positions, and them to work together even when they disagree. When they disagree, they come to a solution, or just it's supposed to be for the people, but it connects when you say that they said they're not supposed to ask questions. That's why I would be asking questions.
Yeah, it's great. I said at school here, I'm encouraged to ask questions because I am expected to be a productive human being when I finish school. Actually, that comes automatic here. You know, with all the student loans and you don't really play around when you're at school. You're trying, hey, I have to finish this, and even before you finish, you start looking for a job, and then when you get one, you have to strive to show that you are actually relevant. And then that's why the whole critical thinking mindset comes in, because you are expected to be productive. While I wasn't expected as I went to school, my grade 1, 2, 3, right? But again, we did not discuss the politics, right? How the governance, how the government structures, the elections or democracy. We didn't discuss that in order to break it down to who does what. And then we reach to the corruption, elite, classes. We didn't tackle that. We can do that in our next sections, where we will be more specific, because I would like to bring evidence, right? This is very important. What I'm discussing with you today is we are introducing a mindset to learn what's going on, but we need to find a moment where then we can analyze the evidence to say, hey, it's been more than 40 years since Mozambique became independent. What do you make of it? I would like to be able to say, well, the first 20 years, Mozambique grew more than 5 to 7% of the gross development product. I need to be able to say, what does that growth, economic growth, mean? And then I would say, from what I learned, that it was just a global comparison of the economy as a country. It was not looking at the economic growth meaning to the Mozambican. Like, if the country is growing, what does it mean to me? And then I would say, well, what you see as economic growth reported in global reports may not necessarily mean economic growth for the regular citizen, the person that is struggling, because the teachers, maybe they don't get a salary on time, if they do, right? Or the police, they don't get paid well, so they are encouraged to find alternatives. Otherwise you have children, you have to feed them. Then
I'm so sorry to cut you off. okay, if the police isn't getting paid, which is a government official, I would be angry. That's like a test to see if the police is going to do their job or not. But if I wasn't getting paid for any type of job, unless I loved my job, I'm not going to do it. But police officers are stressful. Teachers, those are two important factors. One produces growth and one helps shield violence and destruction. So if the police aren't getting paid the right way, if the teachers aren't getting paid the right way, why are these government men that are in power? I'm sorry, they are corrupt. They are. They're taking y'all money. I'm sorry, I see it. I'm sorry to say it.
No, it is what it is, right? It is what it is. We call it what it is. It's corruption, yes, but I wouldn't just keep it at that, because it would probably reduce the actual problem. Because corruption is not the problem. I think corruption is a result of the problem. Suppose, for instance, that the teacher is paid well. Actually, do you know that some countries, the police does not carry firearms? Yeah, I was in Finland some years ago.
Other people that carry machetes, or that makes no sense. Like people that aren't government officials that have a gang or more than a gang, a cartel of some sort, they get guns quicker than the police.
Yeah, no, I was trying to say that it's kind of, there is corruption, yes, a lot, in almost, it's even part of the DNA. Like, hey, you're going to an immigration post office, you know that you have to have it's kind of, but it's tricky, because since it's not official, if you find somebody who that day would like to appear in the media to say that they're doing a great thing, anti-corruption and all, you might be framed and say you're bribing an officer. And then if you're trying to bribe an officer,
yes,
that's what people do every day, everywhere, right? Yes. And because that's what people do every day, everywhere, it keeps going, almost in every field. But sometimes you are caught up in a situation where you're bribing an officer, and then the officer puts you in the camera saying you're bribing an officer. So it's the huge media scandal that, a citizen from X country was put in jail because he or she was trying to bribe an officer. And then you see, it happens. And then you say, oh gosh, but we know that it's just how it is. The problem is, what are we going to do about it? So you want one way to acknowledge that there is corruption, yes, but you can't really point, as in trace the corruption and you catch when it's happening. But you can point, you can't, because it's the invisible hand.
Why you can't, and I'll tell you my reason why we kind of can't. 60% of us, or
yes.
The situation.
Here in the US, you can trace, because everything is traceable. I think the key point I learned here is follow the money, right? You follow the money. Back there at home, how are you following the money that you gave the officer in an envelope?
Ooh.
Like it was in an envelope, and when he receives, it's like you've never seen each other. You don't know my name, I don't know your name. That's it. I just let you pass. Let's say you are speeding, right? In the car, I stop you. You know that you are speeding, and it's even you who say, officer, so can we make a deal, like that? And then I say, okay, do something. I even know the language. Like, hey, do something. I know what it means. He knows what it means. Everybody knows what it means, but nobody knows what it doesn't. So then we bribe. We don't bribe, but it's a system of invisible hands that you cannot really trace. That's why when you see scandal cases on the media, some of them say, didn't you really know that you can't get a bank payment of a bribe? Really? Like it's kind of those who are part of the corrupt system, they know their ways. That's why it is very hard to prove in a system where if you try to
I know how. I challenge you. I know how they're doing it. I'm sorry, I said it on my show before. I'm about to tell you, and you about to say that's plausible. So the only way for them to be having untraceable money is right in our faces. The same thing is happening in Ukraine, where wars are being sparked, femicide, and people are dying in organizations, bad or like all of a sudden these organizations are born and created. They're causing a bunch of people to complain about their families and friends being dead. Then guess what happens? Guess what happens? Somebody is telling Africa to do this, certain parts of Africa, because guess what happens then? Money starts coming to Africa, but going to specific locations like to the elite. That's how they're doing it. They're doing it in our face like they're doing it in Ukraine face, because I talked about this early on my show. I won't talk about Ukraine like that. I just, under a minute, I'll say that there's wars going on that are orchestrated, but we don't never see the underlying causes of these wars. We will never hear from the people that really were born there, like you know, you were born in Africa, you know, South Africa. And it's like, now that I'm listening to you, this is why they don't want us to talk amongst each other, whether white or black or Hispanic, because once we agree and certain people start listening to people, they start seeing the corruption going on, that is the only way to get money and make the poor suffer, is to kill people in mass homicides, get away with it, and they get a bill. Oh, my bad, they get billed. When Putin kills people, he gets a bill. When Africa kills people, they get paid.
Yeah, it's a tricky argumentation, and it bears a lot of both facts and opinions that can be analyzed in either in the national political context to what really, because the war in Ukraine, it involves really a lot of hands around why and how. And I was actually initiating an article before we started to write. I'm putting together a research proposal, which is the political memories, how much of it is the collective memories, how much of it inform the design of strategies for peace interventions in a way that the peace agreements, they last longer. And by longer, I mean eternal. Otherwise, the way things go, I'm saying on that research proposal, that at this moment, what I see is that those who have experienced war, they flee to another country. They come to the US.
Guess what? You just said the answer. Yeah. What happens? Same thing in Ukraine. Ukrainians are coming to the United States. Mexico. Mexicans are coming fleeing because of what? Africans are fleeing because of what? The war. Yeah. The wars that are being sparked up. Is something corrupted?
Yeah, no, my fear here, is to diminish the actual problem into the corruption. That's why I was insisting that corruption is not the problem. It's one of the consequences of the key problem, because it really involves interests. Take, for instance, back then in the late 40s or 50s, when the US was helping Europe to restore Western Europe with the Marshall Plan. This is just a side note. There was the whole structure and movement that robustly made sense, and economically, it brought results. So the Western Europe was restored.
Yes.
From the ashes, right?
Yes.
But you cannot say the same into other conflict-prone areas. You have regions like the Sahel, they have been in conflict almost forever, right? And you have the conflict in Ukraine, you have the conflict in Ethiopia. The conflict in Ukraine is taking a different shape, and it's probably now in a different, really analytical context, because it's causing, in a fast speed, a lot of people displaced, both displaced and dead. I think now globally, the United Nations is going to publish a report in March. They say it's almost 100 million people globally will be forced to flee from war or disaster. Like, there's 100 million people not knowing what to do to keep themselves safe. This is today. And my question on that research, on that research proposal, is how can we make sure that what we learned in the past conflicts will inform us, both as citizens, global citizens, as global government entities, and global international organizations, and local day-to-day invisible hands? How can all that happened before, the peace agreements, the ceasefires, the way they were agreed, what can we learn from it so that today we know what to do? And because the war, Russia, Ukraine, it's not new. But for certain generations, I'm saying that this is like a new thing. But no, it's not new. It happened before. What did we learn from it, right? So these are the questions that go beyond our frustration at the moment, because if we do not capture this moment and filter the evidence on what exactly is going on, who are the interested parties everywhere in all of these implications and conflicts, we are not going to learn to design a strategy not to go back there again tomorrow. Take for instance, home. At home, it's a couple. The couple, they have been together for however long. Each conflict that they have, they're supposed to be learning, right? And if they didn't learn from a conflict they had 5 years ago, they have again the same conflict 5 years after. They have again the same conflict.
Yeah, that's how I feel. I can relate. You know what? I have to say this real quick, and then we're going to move to your you doing your podcast. And I have to record myself saying this. I have to have you back on the show. You're very well educated, and you're teaching me. I love people who teach me.
To learn here too.
Seriously, heritage.
Yeah, so the idea is to learn from what's happening so that we can prepare ourselves not to go back in the same trap again. The problem there, I mean, there are many problems, right? But one problem I point is the people. You see, whoever is fighting, they're using the people as shields. And I'm not focusing in Ukraine conflict. I'm focusing in every conflict, everywhere. The people, we as regular citizens, are taken as shields. A ruling party does not agree with the ruling, with an insurgency. They take people, put in between, they make shields. They start chopping people off. I mean, really, you don't, it's been quite a long time since you don't hear that there is a battlefield between only the armies of Group A and the armies of Group B. It's always the armies against the people. See, this is where I get frustrated, and I fear to only use corruption as the key problem, because corruption is, yes, one of the problems, but it's not the ultimate problem. See? Now, why am I saying that? I'm saying it because a life should matter, not because there were two people dead, but because there was one person dead.
Respect.
That's when we start counting.
Respect.
One person died, there it is.
Yes.
What is the issue? And then we look at it. It's not because, oh no, this war, the 100 people died, and the other war, 5 people died. So between these two wars, let's choose the other one.
I was about to say that, dude. Yes, yes, that's what they do. Exactly what they do.
So, and this happens also in the same war. Like we wait in the beginning. I was telling you about the insurgency in Mozambique, these terrorist groups. They started killing one person one day. And then, two lives the other day. And then burning one house. And then burning a police station. Like in small proportions until when it got out of control, that then the media started to, oh, wait a minute, this is bad. See, but it has been bad from person one who died. The same case in Ukraine, this happened before. I've been reading, there was 2010. When I looked at the data there, I was like, wow, so this has been happening. It's just that it has been in the background. Now it came to the surface. So now the whole globe is paying attention, but it has been there all along.
Tell me, I wish I could. We're going to end at 1:15, so we're going to move on. I want you to know that I usually give people 15 minutes, but your knowledge, your brain must come out through verbally. So let's talk about your podcast and what you talk about on your podcast.
Yeah, my podcast is Thinking Through with LJ. And what I do there is to invite people who I may know or I may not know, but I become familiar with what they are doing, whether they are doing research, they are curious, they write about conflicts, international development, they have their curious mindset of analyzing things. I try to come to them and learn what they think.
Was it hard at first?
Yeah, the essence is to the essence is to try to enter in this field of a decolonizing narrative of many conflicts. By decolonizing narrative, it's usually actually the trend that there is this notion that knowledge belongs to a certain group, a certain elite. While I believe differently, knowledge belongs to anyone who knows.
I agree. You know what? I'm gonna piggyback off of what you're saying. The Pope in where he lives right now, he is authorized to see certain scriptures of the Bible that the rest of the people, that is unbeknownst to them because they never asked, because they're told not to ask, technically, never seen. And so I'm like, why is this knowledge forbidden when we all get slapped a Bible and we're learning the Bible, but he can learn a little advanced more? If we were learning the truth, or which it is the truth, parts of it, why is stuff being censored to where only the Pope can read it? That's weird to me. I'm sorry.
No, I mean that's another field where you want to catch me in, and I will get myself trapped there.
Yes, sir. I love your answer. Well said.
Because it's religious debates. They also require a different context. I would have to make a setup, right, and disclose myself, my religious identity, which I wouldn't want to enter there. But
understood.
But the issue of books, who has access to which, you need to know, and I know that you know because I was asking you about a book before, remember? Mm-hmm. It's power. Knowledge is power. We know it. The elders have said it. You know, Nelson Mandela.
You look at it as cheesy. Every time they say believe in or use your imagination, you know, these cheesy sayings, and then knowledge is power, people be like, whatever. No, it's true.
It is. That's why Nelson Mandela's struggle was, hey, let's educate the people. And by educate people, it's not like, hey, you need to do this and that and that, this and that and that. No, it's to create the environment where people can pursue knowledge independently without fearing. I need to be free to, okay, I'm going to a library or to a bookshop and I can buy a Bible, I can buy a Quran, I can buy a Kitab, I can buy a Torah, I can buy all these sacred books of different religions because I want to. Why? Because I want to see what is there. Why do I want to see what's there? I want to be able to converse with somebody of the other religion without necessarily having to take weapons and plah each other. Just because you are a religion A, I'm a religion B. So the notion of education goes exactly through that. That's my understanding.
You know what's stupid? I don't get why we kill each other because of our religion unless there is some underlying cause for it. Because I don't understand why a Christian would kill somebody that's Muslim or whatever. What we need to do instead of killing each other is to learn about different religions fully, like an archaeologist type deal. Learn about these different religions. Just because you're a Jehovah's Witness and somebody is an atheist, learn why, teach them what you know, but don't expect them to convert. Just teach them. Your knowledge may change that person's life.
See, it's very dangerous because, like I said, you might end up trapping me there in the religious context because I am very reluctant to a religion that has a marketing department.
Oh, okay. That's all you had to say. Because what I'm going to do is I'm going to look it up later. Because I'm going to look up what religion has a marketing department. Because I want to know about every religion. I'm not prejudiced. I don't care.
Neither I am. I'm not saying that's bad. I'm saying that's dangerous because we know in the world way of thinking that when an organization has a marketing department, the purpose is to sell out the product, right? To promote and all that. These strategies to make the product known. All right. Now, my understanding of religion, it's very into me. It's very personal. What do I feel? How do I feel? My encounter with my belief, and my belief can be God, can be Jehovah, can be Allah, can be the Supreme, can be the universe, can be.
Yes, that's how I think too, dude. Yeah.
That's me. And that's why I fear a lot to discuss religious matters when I know that someone did not do the same kind of reading that I did.
Understood. I haven't done the reading, but I've done virtual.
Or I did not do the same kind of reading that the person did, because again, you were saying that, hey, a book, it's also a question of interpreting. When someone takes the Bible or takes the Quran, there are those who go hand to hand, word by word. What it is what it means. What it is what it means. And then you find another person that say, oh no, what is there? It's part of the context of that era that it was written. So you have to also, it's a lot. It's a web that it's too complex to navigate, that I would prefer that we find a specific moment to it and then we prepare. We have to bring evidence, Yeah.
Definitely. Until then, how about this? My last question, I have to pick you for this last question. It's not religious though, but
feel free.
What would you like to see, sir? Because to be honest, I wish that we can just snap our fingers and you be the president of the whole African race in Africa. Because, and let me tell you why before I ask you the question, because you study every religion, you're very diverse, you study almost a lot of languages. Not you may know just 3 to 5 specific languages, but you've heard and studied possibly others. So what I want to know is, what do you see in the next 2 decades if we don't change and start helping not just the civilians raping their pockets every day to help us Africans in Africa, but I'm talking about how can we raise our voices, whether African American or fully African, to change in the next 2 decades Africa?
Well, you're asking a $1,000 question there.
Yes.
But I think I hold the privilege that I went through my former education, my recent education. During my conflict resolution course, I was exposed to this notion that, hey, look, you cannot help to resolve a conflict if you come in the room where the parties are, part A and B are, with a preconceived notion that A is right, B is wrong.
I agree.
So I have been prepared to professionally enter a room open-minded and open-hearted. And there was even a hard thing to do, saying, forget that you have a heart that feels, but do not neglect your feelings. I was like, oh, okay.
That's what I'm doing.
Okay. But the point there was, forget that you have a heart that feels, because when we enter a room, there is that second or first impression, right? That you click to somebody, whether professionally, socially, whatever layer or spiritual or mindset you are in. When you enter a room, there is always one eye. You look, even if it's just a second, you didn't stare at each other, but there is this kind of connection.
I was thinking connection. Yes, yes.
Word is connection. You connect to somebody. So as a conflict resolution expert, you are taught exactly not to do that, because then you will be biased all along. So you will be focusing your care, your kindness into one side, and then you will be frustrating the other side. And then the other side will be trying to prove that you are wrong just because you have demonstrated affection to side A. And yet you are the mediator of that conflict. So can you imagine? You are mediating a conflict where one of the sides doesn't trust you. So that mediation is already doomed to fail. So this is the privilege that I have acquired. And every time I enter a room to discuss an issue, I try to remember, not always, again, we are human beings, right? Depending on how we woke up, depending on how we have been shutting or keeping quiet throughout the day, at a moment in a day, we are kind or rude. It's very seldom that you are neutral. So anyway, that's my whole point. And you asked, what do I see in 2 decades, in 20 years? Wow. When you say 20 years, I imagine my country, we stayed 20 years. And then after that, voila, there was war again. See, so I do not trust 20 years. 20 years is very short time to give myself comfort because of my recent experience, right? But to answer the question, if I'm to look beyond, right, and acknowledging the person who was in Ukraine in 2010 and is in Ukraine or was in Ukraine today, see, this person might be saying, oh, wow, this is a deja vu, because they had the same feeling, right? And the same person in the Sahel, in Sudan, years ago, after, it's kind of different moments, the same conflicts taking place, and it cuts people's hopes. Now, what do I see? I see a learning curve that people will be gathering knowledge now, seriously. Gathering knowledge, meaning we're having this conversation today. I need to be able in 5 years to look for you, say, hey, Kimberly, do you have that show? Can you send me the link in case I don't have it? Because I think I disagree with myself with a few things I was saying there. Let me look it through, all right? So I will be gathering knowledge of what I personally said, all right? And that to me will be a moment of learning. And what questions are you asking? And what answers am I giving? Or how am I defending myself instead of answering the question? It happens. You ask me a question. Instead of answering, I'm defending myself. And without knowing, I see myself being one side or the other instead of looking the fact. So I see 20 years from now and 50 years or endless years from now, a learning curve where I focus my contribution based on evidence. What I have learned that works, what I have learned that it doesn't work, and how much of it will influence that a new conflict will occur. Because I guarantee you, if we do not learn from the failed peace agreements, if we do not learn from the failed ceasefires, if we do not learn from the silenced, unattended grievances, because the politics keeps going, and those political elites that keep complaining, keep harassing the masses, or keep harassing the democratic and open way of expressing, or those individuals who just follow the trend, yes sir, and they don't see the evidence, we might not even move one step farther from the conflict. We can take breaks, a short break of peace, 10 years, 20 years, or however long, but then we will come back because the issues have not been resolved. Anyway, I went round and round, but I would focus on learning from evidence.
That is super. What's beyond super? Superb. What's beyond superb? I don't know off the top of my head, so I'll just say it's superb. We'll stay as superb. That was very superb said, even though that's not how it's supposed to be worded. So, I would like to say one last thing, and then we're gonna end with how to reach you. Here's a guy that been through a lot of tough situations, and here I feel personally, in my opinion, that we're not only in slavery, modern day slavery, I call it, in the United States, but slavery is definitely pre-existing with corruption in Africa. Now, the reason why I see and I identify with my African people is because innocent people are dying. You're saying to me that people can bribe the police, and it happens here, but like for example with Paul Pelosi. But this is what I'm saying: if people can lie and pay their way out of sinning here on earth, that's what they're being taught. And that's where I draw a line. And people like you, I look up to, because it was an honor to have this conversation, because I'm going to suggest some things to you, and whether you do it or not, I just want to suggest it and get it out on the airwaves. So I suggest that you start, whether you want to or not, one day, maybe in 5 years, like you picked a date, 5 years down the road, start talking to the White House and tell them that your country is suffering. Get your family, get your friends, get a crew, a positive peace talking crew, and say you got family over there, and you don't want to have to keep running over here every 20 years. Like, what if your family member or a bloodline from you 20 years down the road end up running over here? We understand United States is a hub, but some people don't want to be here. Some people rather be back in their home countries. And I respect you for that. I respect you. and I feel like you should talk to the White House, tell them that. And then I also feel this, and then we're going to end with how to find you. I feel that not only should you correspond with the White House, but you should talk to your city, because there's many of countries with different elite government officials. So your South African, I can't pronounce it, city, Mozambique. And go either call Mozambique or contact family members in Mozambique or contact the government and tell them that what's going on. Maybe they can be the first to change it. Maybe they should build like some type of border wall around their country, be the first, so that violence and whoever starts sinning, because religion and politics lies in us all. Whoever starts sinning by killing people deserve to be executed. Period. That's what China does. That's what Russia does. You sin, you get executed. That's all I have for right now. But I feel like the innocent people, if you can kill an innocent person and take their soul away and take their family through hell and make them suffer, you deserve to be put on a swift justice trial to be executed. And anybody that doesn't feel that way, to me, need to understand where I'm coming from and not judge me on me speaking to, because it just makes sense to me. So how can the people find you?
Yeah, I mean, your position is very strong, I must say. and perhaps you do have a background that enables you to be that strong. I don't see Mozambique, for instance, building a wall around South Africa, because we are, after all the colonial legacies, after the civil wars, we are a very warm population. We love each other, right? And the problem is the struggles that every day you do have to find food eventually. But we love each other in a way that we remember that, hey, when we were fighting before, we were able to run away, escape for Zimbabwe, even escape to South Africa in certain communities. So that's why I don't see this kind of the country, I don't see it happening. And the other thing, it's the death penalty. We did not reach there. But again, the context that I'm brought up to may be different. And I believe that your positioning in the death penalty bears this background of where you learned, right? It's harsh. Now, what happens next? In my podcast, Thinking Through with LJ, I try to learn exactly these concepts. Why are you telling me what you know? And then I try to learn more from that, right? You give me some sources. I also go, after we finish our conversation, I go back to the library and see those resources that you have suggested, because I like to learn more, right? I know that this time is very limited. So in the podcast, Thinking Through with LJ, that's what I do. And if you have a topic, an issue that you would like to discuss in that context of teaching each other, analyzing facts, I really would like to learn from you. And info@ubuntulist.com or info@thinkingthroughwithlj.com. Those are the emails I use. The same domains, they take you both to the website. So, and I mean, anywhere you get your podcast from, I believe that there is Thinking Through with LJ, or you just search Leopoldino Jeronimo. But Thinking Through with LJ is probably faster, right? And we will provide the links. But definitely, I would like to continue learning in such environment where we are free, open-minded, and we bring facts to the table. Although we can't really close up on a topic. There were so many issues.
I hate to let you go. It's like I've been talking in 10 minutes with you, but I have to go. Stay on the line. It's been an honor, sir. Y'all, I hope that y'all learned something today, you know, seriously, especially if not from me, from him, like at least 90% from him, 10% from me. Like, this is his heritage. So stay on the line. Take care of you guys. Be safe. And I'll be back on here in a second. Take care.
Take care.